Good morning and welcome to the second No Wrong Doors conference here at Tunxus Community College. Resilience Grows Here has been so fortunate to partner with Tunxus last year in creating an amazing conference that was incredibly well attended and lots of very positive feedback. The most important piece of feedback was 8 till 5 is a very long day. So under Darryl Reome's amazing stewardship and his brainchild of splitting this conference into 4, we are here today for the first of a series of 4 conferences. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome up Darryl Reome, who has given me an enormously long bio, which I will surmise on the spot. So Darryl has been appointed to the position of the campus CEO here at Tunxus Community College, having previously served as the college's interim Dean of Student Affairs. And you will meet very shortly the current Dean of Student Affairs, Chuck Cleary, who's worked for 19 years in several different roles here at Tunxus Community College. So over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Justine, and thank you for everybody for being here today. She's right, I did cut that bio. It would have taken up a good 20 minutes. I don't want to waste anyone's time here. So I am the campus CEO on behalf of Tunxus faculty, staff, and management. We're glad that everyone is here today. And as Justine mentioned, this is sort of a more tailored version of No Wrong Door. We had tremendous success last year, and we were looking to do something a little bit different and tailored to the region. So today's event just happens to be the first of 4 within our region. Tunxus is part of the Northwest region. Schools within our region consist of Tunxus, Nantucket Community College, Naugatuck Valley Community College, and Northwestern Connecticut Community College. So we're happy to be sort of kicking off the series of events. So for the past 21 years though, I've worked in higher ed, and I've chiefly been an administrator. I've also served as a faculty member. I've also served as a certifying official for a brief period. So I feel pretty strongly about these sorts of events. You know, through the years I've observed countless students, transitioning back to civilian life. They have families, they have work commitments, they have obligations, and it's sort of a delicate conversation at times. You're working with different populations like first-generation college students, non-traditional age students, student veterans, and so forth. And you sort of, over the years notice certain things, and I've noticed folks that want to assimilate sort of into the college culture. They want to get on with their business, earn a credential and be successful, and they don't want to necessarily stand out. And from an administrator's point of view, that can sort of be challenging because you want to serve and support all the students regardless of their background and their goals. And you have to take into consideration the complexities that exist. You have students that are maybe having serving overseas, or have faced adversity and a whole host of challenges that we can't fully understand or comprehend. So there's a certain level of sensitivity I've learned that comes with sort of helping people, get to campus and be successful. And that's where an event like No Wrong Door is invaluable. You sort of have an honest conversation and really have to, at the end of the day, ask yourself, what are we doing to sort of ensure the success of the men and women that are sort of walking our hallways each day, right? Because everyone, that is walking our campuses, our hallways, has a story to tell. So today is really sort of an opportunity to start to try and understand and then answer those questions by sharing stories sort of about the challenges that exist. Again, having an honest conversation about the gaps in service that exist, deciding what is fair and adequate, and then sort of moving the needle, right? Sort of, determining how to figure out how we address it, how we move things forward. So the data, and I don't have to tell anybody in this room, but the data on men and women sort of serving in the military, planning to transition back to civilian life, enrolling college classes is impressive, right? And that's why an event like this has to happen. It has to happen on each campus, and we have to sort of have that conversation and start that dialogue. So, and we may not solve all of the problems that exist, but these events are sort of critical, right, to the balance and sort of empowering all the informed pool of professionals in the room here, colleagues that we interact with every day. Really to make sure that students are supported and valued, and we can sort of help them with their confidence as they pursue their educational goals, whatever they may be, right? So I'm very thankful that we're here. I would be remiss though if I didn't thank the people that were instrumental in today's event. Lisa Philippon. Lisa, if you could raise your hand, she's in the back of the room. Justine Ginsberg. There's many others that were involved with today's planning. Dave Welsh, Karen DeBerry, Helen Lozada, Steve Mead, and the IT staff, Laurie Sorice and Debbie Pavlicek. So I thank you all. And again, to our guests, folks that necessarily aren't here all the time, I want to welcome you. I'm glad you're here. And at this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Chuck Cleary, who's the Dean of Student Affairs, to say a few words. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Reome. My words will be brief so that we can get to the exciting workshops this morning. We're glad that you're here, and this morning is to focus on one of our most important student groups. But before we get to that, I just want to point out a couple of housekeeping items. One is the restrooms. The men's and women's room are here, and we also have some in the main lobby, so if you go in the way you came, they are to your left. Campus safety is one of my responsibilities, and I know this crowd is very safety oriented, so in the unlikely event of an emergency, the way to exit would be through the doors that you came in. There is also an emergency exit to my left, so if you go out this way, you can go out through the loading dock. And the cafeteria will be open until 1 o'clock today, so if you're looking for food after the event, just keep that in mind, and they'll be happy to serve you. Again, I'd like to reiterate what Dr. Reome said and thank the Farmington Valley Health District for their help in putting on today's event. I've worked at Tungus for 19 years in several positions, and the Dean of Student Affairs is new to me, one that I'm growing into. I've been looking forward to today's event so that I can continue to learn how I can serve and support our veteran students. One of the highlights for me today is the student panel. I know we're all looking forward to hearing the thoughts and concerns directly from our current students and Tungus graduates. I appreciate that Amber, Dustin, Kelly, James, and Jonathan will be here with us to share their insights. As Dr. Reome acknowledged, there's a number of Tungus employees who helped plan today's events. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of the employees who have started and helped grow the Tungus Oasis, which is in the back of the room, so I hope you take a few minutes today to visit that. Our leadership team, starting with Dr. Addy and Dr. Lambella, and now with Dr. Reome, have consistently supported our veteran students to give them a place where they could connect, find fellowship, and support towards their academic goals. Karen DeBerry has been single-handedly advocating for veterans for many years on our campus and deserves special recognition, as does Dave Welsh. They've put many years into advocating for our veterans and working above and beyond the call. Karen and Dave have also worked with numerous community partners to strengthen our ties to the local community and increase support for campus veterans. For my part, I look forward to working with Dr. Reome, Karen, Dave, and Helen to make sure we serve our veterans with care and dignity. Tungus was recently recognized by Intelligent.com as one of the 50 most veteran-friendly schools in the country, and on that list there were only 2 community colleges, and Tungus was one of them. So that's thanks to the hard work of the people I just mentioned. And we're proud of that recognition. However, we know that we have to be present and attentive to our veterans, and we can't just rest on our laurels, that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. In addition to the Oasis, we have 22 active clubs on our campus, and one of the most active and long-standing has been the Veterans Club. This provides social activities, they participate in charity events, and they work closely with student government to make sure that the veteran voices are heard in the student governance structure. In honor of President's Day later this month, we will be sponsoring a letter writing campaign and a care package campaign to service members overseas. One of our students has come forward and he has a brother serving in the 4th Cavalry Regiment, so we will be making sure that we send items to him. If you know of any active service members who would appreciate the letters or care packages, please see Karen or me through this morning, and we'd be happy to include them when we do this. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back to Justine Ginsberg, my new best friend.
Thank you, my friend. Sure. Thank you. So, in case you hadn't worked out, my name's Justine Ginsberg. I'm the Director of Resilience Grows Here. Resilience Grows Here has an honoured role in working with the men and women who have served this country and the men and women who support those who have served this country. I think it's really important for all of those civilians to recognise that it's less than half of 1% of the American population that ever raises their hands to answer the call of service. So that leaves 99.5% of the rest of us to pick up the slack when they get home. So working with partners like Tunxus and Dr. Reome and Chuck to be able to create an environment where we recognise that when our veterans return home, they've done their part. It's our turn to pick up where they require our assistance and to push forward and to be open to the understanding that we don't always get it right. Today is the first, as I said, of a 4-part series where we are going to gather information from you. By being led through with some amazing speakers, we're going to talk about the conditions under which veterans serve and study when they return home. And we're going to look critically at what we're getting right and how we can improve for the future. So at the end of this 4-part series, Dr. Reome and I have an arduous task to write a blueprint of pushing forward into 2021. How do we create a roadmap for community colleges in the state of Connecticut, and in fact the country, in improving the services to veterans and to veteran families? So we ask that throughout the day, if you have ideas, yell them out. I've got brainstorming paper. We'll be taking down your ideas and your opinions, and we will be consolidating those at the end of this 4-part series. So very briefly, who is Resilience Grows Here? We were birthed at the Farmington Valley Health District after a $1.5 million grant from the Movember Foundation. We are incredibly proud to say that we are now our own 501c3. We're in the last year of that funding from the Movember Foundation, and we will go on to continue to do the work and in fact expand the work that we've done with veterans. Without spending all morning talking about what we do, I want to show you a film that was created last year. It was created by one of our funding partners, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. We do a lot of work in community and a lot of work with suicide prevention, and the short film you're about to see is one particular group of veterans that we have worked with and empowered with the knowledge of suicide prevention and mental health first aid, and what they're doing with that training and how they're shaping the brothers and sisters who have served and live within their community. So without further ado, coming home.
Wars aren't like TV. That's the hardest thing I think it is for the mind to comprehend. And you really see that what you're killing isn't the bad guy, he's another person. So I got on the plane, I left Iraq, I left the war zones, I left Fallujah City, the invasion. All the burnt bodies, people with missing arms, legs, half their faces, I'm gonna leave it there. It doesn't stay there, it doesn't not get on the plane with you. You're trying to put it into a box, a black box with chains, and you're trying to keep those chains locked instead of going to seek help. Something triggers it where that memory comes back. You can't unsee what you saw, but it's okay to be screwed up. It's okay, we don't have to hide it anymore.
PTSD is not a disorder. PTS is the most normal response to the most abnormal circumstances. And there's an enormous stigma with mental health in this country. In America, when you look at the risk factors for suicide for our veterans, A lot of that stems from not being able to access mental health services early enough when they need it.
I will still say in the military, and I've been retired for 10 years, you wouldn't dare say you had a mental issue. I can't go to combat, I can't take care of my friends, I can't cover their asses. Two, if you came out, you're pretty much done in the military.
When you're in service, there are still obstacles to self-disclosure. For certain career fields, a pilot, they cannot have a mental health condition. When we're serving, the public wants us to be healthy. And so people still hide their mental health.
My husband got out of the Marine Corps and lost that identity and wasn't sure where to turn. And it was easy for him to fake it while he was still within the service. But out of the confines of that camaraderie and out of the confines of that predictability, that's when he started having some difficulty.
You know, the system has failed them many times, so they build up a facade. They know just the right answers to give, so people will stop asking the additional questions.
When someone reaches that point, that's a sad state, you know, for those individuals.
The population that we serve at the Farmington Valley Health District is very high in veterans, and it takes on average 10 years for a person to get help for an underlying mental health condition. When an opportunity for a grant from the Movember Foundation presented itself for us to really create an inventive and outside the square kind of program to work with our veterans and mental health and men's mental health, I jumped at the chance, so Resilience Grows Here was born. One of the most humbling lessons that I learned as a professional is that I don't have all the answers. I can provide the trainings and I can provide the backup and the support, but a lot of the work gets done in communities like the Valhalla Motorcycle Group.
The ones that come here, these young guys, they go to the wars and they hear through the grapevine about the barn because they're looking for another source. The first thing I will say is like, hey, you know, we're all screwed up, right? So they get in that relaxed mode, and then when they start seeing the walls on the faces, we start talking about them individually. That's when they'll break.
And the beauty of RGH and taking that course was it taught us, don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
And when somebody's in trouble, it's all about asking questions. You can't baby them. You can't coddle them. They're in trouble, you need to understand that you have to bring them out of that trouble. And the only way to do that is by being honest with them and moving forward from there.
Because eventually when you bring down the wall, that's when you can open up to help.
When they come in here, we're not saying lay on the couch and tell me how you feel. I've never asked anybody to tell me how you feel. Before they even got here, I already knew how he felt. I already knew what he'd seen. I already know where his mind is. I think that's the difference here. They go to a psychiatrist's office, and I'm not taking anything away from them because they're very valuable. We try to get them to that level next.
So when I met Ben 2 years ago and he reached out to us about some suicide prevention training and peer support training, it suddenly became the natural alliance.
So we build that trust in the people that we trust to take care of them, and we trust the RGH people. We screened who we work with, and we found RGH close by, willing to bend over backwards, because we're talking about somebody's life. We're not talking about another paycheck for a job. It's somebody's life.
Ben brought our son Larry's things home from Iraq, and so that's how we met Ben the first time. And he's come to support our family since Larry was killed.
It's from his heart. He knows exactly what these men and women have been through. He's seen it. He's seen it on the battlefield, and he's seen it when he's had to knock on the doors to let families know that their loved one won't be coming home. And he has to be ready to jump out of bed and run. And he's so respected and so loved. He does it well.
Lisa is the embodiment of what Resilience Grows Here is. Lisa's understanding and ability to talk the language of the families and talk the language of the veterans. This is a woman who has used the greatest personal loss to connect with the community.
It means the world to me to help our veterans. That's just my heart in taking care of them on behalf of my 2 sons who served, and especially my oldest son, Larry, who gave his life in Iraq.
So when you look at small town America, there's something incredibly unique about how they live and work together. Everybody knows everybody. There are families that have lived in these communities for 300 and 400 years. It's got an incredible feel of connectedness.
So for me, I look at my community as circles within circles. So I belong to the 103rd. I'm an airman. Community is however you define it. Everybody in here kind of take on as my personal responsibility. Because as long as you feel like you belong somewhere, that's the kind of roots that keep you from hurting yourself even when bad things happen.
There is a relief in understanding that this is not just them, this is not just the dirty little secret in their own family, that this is something that is a lot more common than we think that it is. I think the more people like myself and like RGH and the community that they have telling that story, I think we'll see more people raising their hand and saying, me too.
Just to know that they have someone that they can call and they can count on, so that at the end of the day, when they lay their heads down on their pillow, they have some hope. And I think that is what Resilience Grows Here is giving them, is hope.
DGR and Movember and their supporters really allow us to do this work that changes lives. In less than 2 years, we've trained 2,000 community members in suicide prevention.
And so there is an awareness that is blooming. Thanks to organizations such as Movember and the distinguished gentlemen riders, we're going to make it happen.
RGH can be a barn, RGH can be a field, RGH can be an office space. And one of the things that our RGH members tell us is it's like coming home.
I know at any time I can call Justine for help. She's going to become embedded in the motorcycle world, and having the RGH right here, which this is a high route for motorcycle rides, it's a win-win, for everybody.
So there's a couple of things that I want to pick up on from that video, and the reason I wanted to start today's convening with that is for all of you who work with students, the resources you have at your disposal are not just here inside of the campus. They exist out there inside of community because that's where your students live. Resilience Grows Here was formed to assist in providing community supports to those men and women who were served. And one of the most important statements that was made in that film was by Mad Dog, who said, "It's not a paycheck, it's a person's life." And for all of you who work with the men and women who have served, either working with the GI Bill, working in a classroom, working in student support, student services, these men and women have experienced things that the majority of us will never understand. This is not just your job, this is a person's life. And these human beings are the most incredible heroes. And I can never present this without being emotional, because the bravery that we see every single day is exhibited by these incredibly humble human beings. And one of the biggest challenges you will have as providers is that they don't ask for help because they always think someone needs it more than them. So part of our job is recognizing that all of them deserve our help, and being persistent and being non-judgmental. I also would be remiss if at this point I didn't thank my dear friend and colleague, Lisa Philippon, the gorgeous redhead in the film. Lisa is an inspiration to work with, and she is the life force behind a lot of what RGH does in our communities. And as I said, she has used the greatest loss that a human can experience to give her the strength to provide love and support for others. So thank you, Lisa. We're going to hand over now to, sorry, I need a moment just to take a deep breath. Before I hand over, you all have a evaluation on your chair. If you could fill it out through the day and then leave it behind when you go, this is our way of knowing what's worked for you today, what you wanted more of, and helpful suggestions or feedback about what went well, what you loved, and how you would like us to present this again next year. We are a 4-part series because last year the overwhelming feedback was, yes, we have to have this, but could you make it a shorter day? It was a long day. So please, we really value that feedback, and we do listen and we do adapt accordingly. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to a 3-part presentation team, and they will shuffle accordingly. I believe Dave Welsh is first. So we have Dave Welsh, who served in the Army from 1970 to 1972 with a tour of Korea. He has been he was the financial aid director and the veterans advisor at Tunxus from 1983 to 2012, and he's done a lot of volunteer work with youth sports groups and literacy volunteers. We also have Todd Wilkinson. Tech Sergeant Todd Wilkinson is from the Connecticut Air Guard and has been for 16 years. He has a magnificent resume, which I will let him tell you about rather than me reading a beautiful long list. But we thank him for his time. On the video you saw a number of our 103rd friends. RGH does a lot of work out at the 103. Part of the work we do there is about prevention. How do we work with our young men and women who serve our community and provide them with the resources and resilience building skills so that when they then come home, they have a greater network to return back into their communities. And then we have Helen Lozada, who is a Tunxus alumni and a first-generation American. Again, I will let her tell you a little bit more about herself, but Helen works as a certifying official. Thank you very much. I cut and pasted all their resumes and they're long, so I should have highlighted all of that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over into Dave's hands to talk about Military 101, and then we're going to move into the educational benefits that our veterans are entitled to. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Justine. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Since the next part of the program has to do with veterans educational assistance, a lot of that depends on how the particular veteran has served, or if somebody's still in the military, how they are serving now. So, I mean, for many of us here today, this is something you've known for a long time. For others, hopefully it will be helpful to give you a bit of understanding of what somebody's coming to you with. Under our overview, Nick, if you would. Yeah, please, the overview slide. Oh, okay, different format. Okay, so we're going to talk about exactly what the armed forces are. We have the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. And Nick, are we on the same page here? Yeah. We have a little bit of a disjunction between the way this is presented and the way I presented it for myself, but I think we'll be able to cover everything. But within the armed forces, we have the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. I guess the Space Force isn't really a joke anymore since it was in the State of the Union message the other night, but I don't know how far it's gone. I don't know if you can enlist in the Space Force. I don't think anybody's been discharged from the Space Force yet, but I'm quite sure that the Space Force will be considered under GI Bill purposes and tuition waiver purposes another branch of the service. An important distinction that we need to make in this context is the difference between the active service and the reserve components, what the service member obligations are, and finally I want to talk a little bit about who exactly serves in the military these days. Now, each of the main services has an active component. People who want to serve enlist, they sign a contract. The contracts are very interesting. They run to dozens and dozens of pages. They include things like you won't sexually harass anybody, you won't get tattoos on certain parts of your body, things like that, in addition to the real meat and potatoes. After someone signs the contract and enlists, they go for basic training. In the Marine Corps, they call it boot camp. And that's usually somewhere around 10 weeks. Generally then there's specialty training, which might train you to be a military police person or a truck driver or something along those lines. And then you're assigned to a regular unit and you're in service full-time, 24/7, 365, with 30 days of paid leave every year. And contract terms generally seem to be about 6 years. There may be some exceptions there. So that's being in the military full-time every day for a certain period of time. And by the way, as I go on, please raise your hand if you have a question. So, in the reserves, a lot of things start the same. The Army has a reserve, the Navy has a reserve, the other branches do. Again, you sign a contract, you enlist, you go for basic training, then for some specialty training. But at that point, you return to what's called your home unit, which is a reserve unit, and you're doing part-time service. Your obligation, the basic obligation, is 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. People in the reserves can be assigned to additional training, which might take them away for a period of months, in addition to their weekends and their summers. In the reserves, you can be deployed. Deployment means that you become part of the active service. You went through basic training with some people who are in the active service. They've been in the active service. If you're in the reserves and you're deployed, you're going to be joining up with some of those people again, in a sense. And then you are a 24/7, 365 person in the service for as long as the period of your deployment lasts. The National Guard is a little bit different. It's still a reserve component, but if you probably have heard the term state militias, but in the early part of the 20th century, Congress decided to incorporate the state militias into a reserve component called the National Guard. The National Guard was a component of the U.S. Army, and at the end of World War II, when the Army Air Force was separated from the Army and became its own branch of service, the Air National Guard was created. Now again, people who decide to join the National Guard sign a contract, they go for basic training, they go for some specialty training, and they return home and they have a part-time service obligation. And it's a weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And again, they can be called on for additional training as well. Now, one of the interesting things about the Guard is because it started as a state militia, it's generally under the control of the governor of the state until it might be deployed and become a federal unit. So when we have snow emergencies, weather emergencies, other things like that, you might see people in military uniforms doing things like helping to direct traffic and clear snow. Those are people in the National Guard, and they're serving as the state militia at that point. However, the National Guard can also and is deployed as part of the federal active services. So a question that I think is interesting is who actually is in the service these days? We've had an all-volunteer force since the mid-70s. The draft during the period of the Vietnam War ended in, I believe, 74, 75. Since then, nobody has been forced, nobody's been required to serve in the military. We do still have the selective service system, which some of us will remember as where we registered to be possibly drafted, got a draft card. About a month ago, when we took out that Soleimani, the terrorist leader in Iraq, I read that the selective service website was shut down due to an overage of traffic because so many people were emailing and saying, am I going to get drafted now? You remember the atmosphere at that time. People were talking about, is there going to be possible an actual shooting war between us and Iran? And so people do remember the draft. But we haven't had a draft for quite a while. People who serve in the military have enlisted voluntarily. Only 1% of American families have a connection to the military at this point, have someone in the family in the military. Obviously, in previous times, that number's been much higher. In World War II, it was obviously much higher. My mother, who grew up during World War II, used to say, when she was a kid during World War II, if you were a man in the military and you weren't in uniform, you had some explaining to do. But we've not been in a situation like that for quite some time. The New York Times a couple of weeks ago ran a very interesting piece called "Who Signs Up to Fight?" And it found that since 1998, enlistees are increasingly from the South and from areas around military installations. It had two very interesting maps. One was 1998, one was 2008. And each map showed the 500 counties with the most enlistments in the military across the country as a percentage of population. And in 1998, New England had some. A lot of Maine was in the top 500 counties. Some of northern New Hampshire was in the top 500 counties. In 2018, none of New England was in the top 500 counties for enlistments in military service. People in the service now, they tend to be more from the South, and again, from areas around military installations, which probably leads you to conclude already. If you look at the year 2019, 79% of recruits in the Army, which is the largest force, had a veteran in the family. So as this piece said, it's going to become a family occupation. For close to 30% of recruits to the Army at that time, the veteran family member was one of their parents. So we have a much smaller participation of our population in the military now. There's been an issue ever since the Gulf War, really, about the deployment of reservists and Guard members, and some people contend that this is our backdoor draft. We don't have to have a draft anymore because we have the Guard and the reserves. We had a student here not too long ago who had graduated from New Britain High School in June of 2001. And he wanted to be a Marine, he wanted to serve. He wasn't sure he wanted to be a full-time member of the active Marine Corps, 24/7, 365. So he joined the Marine Corps Reserve. So a couple of months after his graduation, when he's in training, 9/11 happens. As soon as he finished his training, he was deployed. Came home for a short period of time, he was deployed again. Came home again for a short period of time, he was deployed again. He'd been deployed 3 times by the time his reserve contract was up. And he came to us and wanted to start school in the GI Bill. And I was talking to him in the office. He said, "Look at me, I'm 23 years old and I'm a freshman in college." He had never, he hadn't anticipated what was going to happen. But that is not uncommon for people in the Guard, people in the reserves, to have multiple deployments in our current wars. And so that's why some people contend that the Guard and the reserve now serve as the backdoor draft. An actual draft of people in conscription would be politically very touchy at this point, as I'm sure you can imagine. So the Guard and the reserves have been called on to make up the difference. Questions? Comments? So again, a very small percentage of our population is serving in the military, highly concentrated among families with a military connection. Now, to get a little more into the specifics of educational assistance for veterans, in the state of Connecticut, we have a tuition waiver for veterans. We have free tuition for most credit-bearing courses in the community colleges, in the state universities, and the University of Connecticut. And under the right conditions, the right service conditions, you could go to UConn Medical School or law school without paying tuition if you were a qualifying veteran. What the Veterans Tuition Waiver requires is that you have served at least 90 days active duty in a defined wartime period. Active duty for purposes other than training. If someone in the reserves gets called up for additional training, and they might go to, I don't know, Fort Benning or somewhere for a couple of months and come back to their reserve unit, it is active duty, but it's specifically, under Army terms, active duty for training. And of course, those folks don't qualify for this particular benefit. You have to be called up to do a 24/7, 365 period of federal service on active duty, not in training, to qualify for this tuition waiver. Now, the tuition waiver is tied to certain wartime periods because the legislature intended it as a readjustment benefit. The obvious things, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. There were a couple of other short-term operations like our invasion of Panama. But the current period of active duty to qualify for a tuition waiver started with the Gulf War in August of 1990, and there's no ending date on it yet. If a veteran is qualified for this, wants to use the free tuition, they simply bring their 214, which a lot of us know is that one-page service record, which kind of defines your life for that period of time, to demonstrate when they were in the service on active duty. Speak to someone like Helen Lozada at the appropriate college, and they get their tuition covered. Eligibility is permanent. You can use the tuition waiver until you qualify for the senior citizens waiver if you prefer to switch to that, but there's no expiration on the benefit. A couple of catches: non-tuition fees aren't covered. Our student activity fee isn't covered. Transportation fees aren't covered. Things like that. Some courses are not covered. And if you take English composition in the summer here, you're earning 3 credits for English composition. But because of the higher education funding structure, it's not considered a course qualified for the tuition waiver. It has to be offered under what's called the general fund. Now, only 13 states have a benefit like this. The last time I looked on Military One Source, and as I scroll through them, it looks to me like our tuition waiver benefit for veterans looks like the best deal for veterans. For example, Florida has a requirement that you have used all other possible sources of assistance, including the GI Bill, to cover your tuition. Another state requires that you have a Purple Heart. But I think ours is really probably the best in terms of the generosity of the benefit to the veteran. Any questions or comments? Hopefully this gives you a little better idea if you weren't familiar with it about what the terms are when you serve in the military, or the reserve component, deployment, things like that. If not, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Sergeant Todd Wilkinson of the Air National Guard. He's going to, I think, transition right into the Air National Guard's education benefits. They also have a tuition waiver for people in the Guard. We'll talk about tuition assistance, which is another program altogether. Thank you.
So I'm Todd Wilkinson, Tech Sergeant with the Connecticut Air National Guard right here in Connecticut. The benefits I'm going to be talking are very similar to what David covered. It's actually quite similar. The key difference is eligibility is not permanent. It is a benefit versus entitlement. So we cover 100% of tuition within the state of Connecticut to any National Guard member, whether they be Army or Air National Guard. The criteria is they have to be in good standing, and it goes to their chain of command in order to validate this. So it's an application that a member will put in when they come back from school. It's available immediate upon enlistment, so once a member decides to join, prior to going to even basic training, they're eligible to utilize the waiver and come to any community college or state school in Connecticut. It covers all the 2-year institutions in Connecticut, the 4 major institutions, as well as UConn. It covers from a low-level associate's degree all the way to a master's. It will cover a Juris Doctor degree, law degree. It'll also cover med school, depending on the individual. The key thing, again, is that they're in good standing. If they don't meet the expectations, they're not showing up, they have issues, the waiver can be revoked. The other thing that happens with that is it's applied each quarter, whereas when they're a veteran, they do that 90 days of active duty, they're coming in, it is good for the duration. Each semester, the member is required to put an application in so we can verify that they are in good standing. It goes all the way to a state level. Once it's approved at the state level, the member is then notified, and the school will then be notified through various channels. The Army and the Air National Guard both have different channels as far as how they notify. Currently in the Air National Guard, we put the responsibility on the member, so they have to actually bring their form into the bursar's office so they can get the tuition removed. David talked a little bit about how our state has a good program for veterans. In regards to tuition waivers for people in the National Guard, there's some states out there that offer no benefits at all. So if a member is serving within the Georgia Air National Guard, there's no education benefits they're getting. There's some states that require they serve for 2 years and be a resident for a year before they can even benefit from the actual program within the state. There's some states that offer tuition reimbursement versus tuition waivers, or a cap on a dollar amount. So Connecticut is a state that actually does support our veterans as well as our current members of the National Guard in a manner that definitely helps them. In addition to that, when you're on an active duty period of time, either with the National Guard, serving an active duty, or various components of the reserves, they qualify for tuition assistance. So tuition assistance is different than a tuition waiver. Every branch, every component sets their own dollar amount. So for example, the Coast Guard caps their tuition assistance at like $2,200 or $2,500 a year. The max for most tuition assistance programs are $4,500. Currently, the Air Force is $4,000. So you can see how that would get very confusing to try to track all this stuff. And a lot of times the member should have a point of contact that they can go to validate what they're able to get. This again is a benefit, is not an entitlement. It's contingent upon being in good standing. all these things have financial repercussions to the members. So if a member to withdraw or fail from a course, that money that the Coast Guard or the Marine Corps or the Army paid for that member to go to college, you're paying it all back. The key difference between the tuition assistance versus the tuition waiver, either the veteran one or the National Guard one, is the tuition assistance can be used at various different programs. It can be used at different institutions, so it's not just segmented primarily to state schools within Connecticut. But the biggest thing also is validating that they're in good standing. So not only do they need to complete the courses, but there's a minimum requirement for the grades they have to get. So they have to maintain a certain GPA in order to benefit from that tuition assistance. Again, they're in the military. They should understand that there's a little bit higher expectation of them, correct? And we're going to hold them to that expectation. But at the same time, these are the different benefits that they get in regards to it. I know someone's going to touch on the GI Bill in a moment. I just want to emphasize with each branch and each component, meaning the active, the guard, and the reserve, there are all different versions of the GI Bill. And each individual component actually can qualify for different versions, so it can get very confusing. The important thing is to remember is just because somebody has a GI Bill doesn't mean they have the same as the guy or girl next to them. But that's all I have for you. I just wanted to give it real quick and short and sweet. David touched on a lot of the tuition veterans program type things. As a member of the National Guard, or even the Air Force or Army or Marine Reserve, if we do 90 days in a contingency operation, the whole tuition program for the tuition waiver for National Guard, it's a lot easier to take a 214 to the VA office than it is to get all that approval. So we become veterans in that same period of time as well. But that's all I have for you. Thank you so much. Helen?
Can you all hear me? Awesome. Thank you all for coming today, and a very good morning to you. I will talk today about the post 9/11 GI Bill, specifically Chapter 33. As Sergeant Wilkinson referred to, there's a lot of different versions of the GI Bill. There is 1606, there's Chapter 31, there's Chapter 33, so there's a whole mess of them. The bulk of the students that we see here at Tunxis do actually qualify for Chapter 33. And basically, Chapter 33 students, when they do serve, they automatically become eligible for these benefits. However, they don't always know that they are eligible and that they do have to apply for these particular benefits in order to get them. There are two ways to do it. They can either go to va.gov online and apply for their education benefits, or they can come to the Office of the Certifying Official and fill out a Form 1990, and we would get that ball rolling for them. Now, to access the actual education benefits themselves, they do have to come to my office with 4 different things. May not apply to everyone, but the 4 basics are the DD 214 form, which Dave referred to. Any transcripts from other colleges that they attended. We do want to make sure that everything that they have earned is included in the program guides for the degree that they're going for here at Tunxis. So we want to take into consideration any other college material that they've earned. In addition, there's something called a Joint Services Transcript, or a JST. And that particular program, what it does is it takes the actual trainings that our veterans go through when they get into the service, and it translates it into academic equivalents. And we see things like computer science, business management, marketing, network essentials, a lot of different classes that do apply toward actual academic programs. So that's a really helpful tool in filling in the gaps and making sure that veterans are recognized for the trainings that they have taken in the service. The other thing that they need to bring to me is the benefit letter, or they can print out their eligibility, which is determined by the VA from the VA website itself. Now, the amounts and the benefits that each particular veteran is eligible for is determined by the VA. One of the points that are used to determine the correct eligibility is their length of service. So a lot of Chapter 33 benefit eligible veterans will come in with 100% coverage. Some will come in at 50% coverage. And that's a determination that's made again by the VA based on a lot of different factors. Once we know what it is that they are eligible for, then we can let them know as far as out-of-pocket costs, if there would be any. For instance, that 50% veteran eligibility, the VA will cover 50% of the costs, so that's tuition and fees. What would happen is if I have a DD 214, and Fed always trumps, pardon the pun, state, so we would use the 50% veteran benefit first, and then that other 50% tuition, we would apply that to the Connecticut tuition waiver. So the student veteran would not have to pay any of the tuition, but he would be looking at 50% of the fees. Does that make sense? Questions so far? All right. So we do try and, I do try and prepare the student for any possible out-of-pocket fees. The other thing that the VA benefits offer is a stipend for books. And again, that amount of is determined by the VA itself based on their service. Typically, the stipend for a full-time student is about $500. Typically, again, students get that around 2 weeks before the beginning of the semester. That doesn't always happen, hence the sad face. Basically, I have a lot of students that will come in and say, you know, I didn't get my stipend, my books aren't here, I can't afford them out of pocket. These things happen, unfortunately. So if you're an instructor, for instance, please just keep that in mind. They do try and aim to get the book stipend to the students, but it doesn't always happen on a timely basis. A lot of different reasons can happen for that, but it is a possibility, so just keep that in mind. What they have to do to maintain eligibility for the veterans benefits is very simple. Number one, they have to make satisfactory academic progress, meaning they have to maintain a GPA that's commensurate with graduation, and here in Tunxus it's 2.5. And they also have to maintain at least a 2/3 percentage of classes successfully completed versus classes that they've attended. So those two things together make up satisfactory progress, and our veteran students have to make sure they maintain that. The second thing that they have to do is follow the matriculation guide, that program or graduation guide. They can't freely just take a course just because it interests them. It has to be part of their program. The VA wants to see progress and it wants to see momentum. So they do want them to stick to those two. A student who is not making satisfactory progress, that veteran is not eligible for benefits during that semester. So they would have to rely on their own. If they do fail a course, they can retake it with benefits from the VA. The VA will pay for a veteran to retake a course that's necessary for graduation. Now, if on the other hand, they get a D and they want to improve their grade, the VA will not pay for the veteran to improve the grade. It's enough technically for graduation. They have to suck it up and move on, kind of thing. Again, they do have to stick to the particular MAT guide, the graduation guide, and anything that they try and take that's not on it would not be covered. There's also a little known thing as the monthly housing allowance, or BAH, and basic allowance for housing is also based on time of service, length of service, among other things, and is so, solely determined by the VA. Normally, they're paid on the first of the month for the previous month. It does impact their BAH if they withdraw from classes. So any kind of withdrawal from classes at this point, we do have to have a form. They also have to come through us and let us know, although there is an in-house alert system that lets us know if a student has withdrawn. I do try to let them know, hey, your benefits are going down because you withdrew. They're not always aware of that. So if you have a student that's talking about withdrawing from a course, definitely let them know to come and talk to me so they can know what impact that has on their BAH. The only time that they're allowed to take a course that's not related to their program is in their very last semester, and that's if they want to take a full-time load in order to get the full-time BAH. They can definitely take extra courses to make up, but that's the only time that they're allowed to do that. If they do change their program on course, not only do they need to do a change of program form here at the college, they also need to do a change of program form for the BA in 1995, and for that they do have to come to my office to complete that. And then I just wanted a quick word about deployment. It happens. We have a lot of guardsmen. We do have a lot of instances where veterans are called to service in the middle of a semester. And we do what we can in order to make sure that the veteran is not penalized, that they're free to return after their time of service to pick up where they left off. And details about that, if you want to, I can definitely help with that if anybody has questions. And if you do have questions, yes?
Question on the JST.
Okay.
Who determines which courses or which training is accepted here at Tuxas?
That would be the Office of Admissions. They do have transfer specialists that look at all kinds of transcripts and make the determination of which ones come in.
Well, I only ask that because we do the same thing at Goodwin, but what we've done is gone beyond that a little bit and worked now with the program directors, the actual department heads, so that they get the second look at that, and sometimes additional credits go their way.
Yes, yes, yes.
If I remember correctly, the JST that the individual gets, that uses evaluations that were done by the American Council on Education.
Correct.
Which is a national higher education group, so they're standardized in that, particularly military training. They'll say, okay, it's going to be 3 credits in phys ed or whatever. But then it's up to the college to decide what the
Correct,
program.
yes. And student veterans who question whether or not or why something wasn't transferred in, I would then take that next step and go to the program director's task. Okay, any other questions? Excellent, thank you very much.
All right, so we're a couple of minutes away from taking a break, but I want to try to stop after each presentation and do a collective brainstorm. You've just learned about the unbelievable complexities of how a veteran qualifies for services. So, having heard that, our veterans in the audience, your experiences with that, now we're going to talk more in our panel, but is there anything that stands out that you want us to put on that roadmap? Going forward, pushing forward, 2021, how do we change the college experience for our veterans to make it smoother, to make it easier? What do we need to start to do, not only as community colleges, but as an organization like RGH? How do you need us to begin to petition state government, federal government to change what is? So, hands up, we've got our scriber who's going to scribe up onto the board. What are your thoughts? Where are the gaps? I'm sitting back there and I can think of about 5. What are you seeing? Don't be shy. No idea is a bad idea. It's just how we shape it later on. Yes?
What about transportation?
Transportation. So what?
Make it easier to get to the college.
making it easier to get to colleges, because one of the harsh realities that all of you know is that our veterans' experience post-service is not always smooth. And for many veterans, there can be transportation issues, not just because of medication, but sometimes transportation restrictions. Even just being able to afford a car or run a car. You wouldn't think that, would you? That you serve this country and you are living below the poverty line. But they are. So transportation, okay, what else? Yeah.
Daycare services.
Daycare services, fantastic. This is about not just our veterans, but our veterans and they have families. And sometimes the veteran that is now embarking on a community college experience is the stay-at-home parent. So how are they able to come to college if they've got nowhere to put their babies? All right, wonderful. What else? Be honest. It's okay. Yeah.
I just want to follow up on the child care thing. A few years ago, we had a student here, not on the GI Bill that Helen's been talking about, but on the special program for disabled veterans, called vocational rehabilitation, which is one great thing about that program. It pretty much provide anything the veteran needs, and her child care costs were being covered by the VA under vocational rehabilitation.
That's fantastic.
And again, it's disabled veterans who can qualify for this.
And you know, I think one of the things you're going to learn as we go through today, I mean, your next presenter, actually two presenters away, you're going to hear from Casey Timberlake, who's going to talk about PTSD and TBI and the unbelievable struggle to get qualified as a disabled veteran. I mean, the system seems stacked to not qualify you. So to be able to get that qualification allows you to have all those services, but how do we get our veterans there so that they can access the services? And really, how can we as a college environment make that easier as the veterans going through that process? Because it can be a long process to go from 5% to 100% disabled. I mean, the system will keep bumping you out. What else do we need in terms of accessing services, accessing the GI Bill, the tuition waiver? Last year someone talked about summer classes. Are summer classes covered? No. So let's put summer classes up there. Yeah.
There's actually state institutions that do cover that. You can take, well, not the veteran, the guard waiver is utilized at UConn, and you take summer courses at UConn.
Okay, so maybe we need to look at what that looks like and see how we can get a translation of that so that if someone's not in the guard, they can then maybe access summer classes. Again, you've got a veteran who's, you know, usually in their mid to late 20s, and they don't want to be in community college for the rest of their lives. They want to get the qualification and get out and get working. How do we make that work? What else can you think of from your either lived experience, your experience as the certifying officials,
Additional funding for education, because I noticed a lot of vets either haven't used their GI Bill and they run out of time, and now they want to go back to school, they don't have the funding to do it.
So like the extension of the qualifying time periods.
Correct. And then maybe if they did use it, they have to go back to school for additional training.
Sure.
They have
Additional funds.
funding for that.
So really looking at not just how you like you have to qualify within a certain time, but you get another chance to go back and then extend your tuition.
I mean, this is just theory.
Hey, if we don't have pie in the sky, we never come up with anything.
Well, everybody, you know, as for the GI Bill, you're paying into it. So if you're paying into it, you should be able to, you know, receive those benefits at any time. It's just
Sure.
like Social Security. You're paying into it,
Yeah.
you should get it. Why are they putting a time restriction on it? They took. They got. Okay. Thank God.
Okay,
Alright, I'm
great.
out of date.
No, that's okay, but you know what? Maybe being able to go back and to look at additional tuition once you've maybe established yourself in a career and decide you need more. How do we make that easier? Yes?
As a vet, I think the biggest thing for veterans coming to school is most of the things I learned were not retiring out, or it's like sitting in the DSO office at the central, and one veteran will say, like, why did you do this, and I think all of the things that exist for veterans, a lot of us don't know, like he was talking about the time, figuring that out. scholarship to do specifically for that?
So what about if we were to again, pie in the sky, to create a mandatory veteran briefing when they start that covers off on all those things? You may not have known that, ... Would that kind of cover that, all those little bits of information that not everyone gets except by just sheer dumb luck? Yeah? Okay, so mandatory briefing, awesome. Yeah?
But that might not cover people's community in our goals, so maybe expanding that.
Expand like a community-based
Outreach program.
Brilliant.
So
So
officers getting that out there.
Love it. So almost like in those open college days that you have that additional information, maybe a portal online that helps to explain all those things. Brilliant. See, as a collective, you guys solve the problem. We're just writing it on a board and putting it in the paper. All right, any other comments about that? We will come back, yeah.
I think a lot of veterans are not aware of the Yellow Ribbon program.
Yes.
Also. So when they come in, it's something you educate them.
Yellow Ribbon program, awesome. All right, so we have got out in the foyer an amazing gathering of community-based resources. One of the reasons we bring vendors to you today is because as staff, as certifying officials, as students, you often don't know all those things that you're eligible for. So RGH works really hard to bring together community-based resources that we work with that can help to bridge some of the gaps that we don't have in colleges. So take 15 minutes, if you can be back by 9:30, grab some more breakfast and head out into the foyer, chat with some of our vendors. They will be here until after 12, so if you miss them now, you'll get them later.